I'm Steve Petrus, the United States National Director of the Canada-United States Law Institute, and it's an honor to welcome everyone here to our 46th annual conference. And we're going to start off right away with some introductions to the co-presidents of our institute. First, Michael Scharf, Dean of Case Western Reserve University School of Law, and Erica Chamberlain, who's the Dean of the University of Western Ontario's Law Faculty. Michael.
Thank you, Steve. Good morning, everybody. Wow. Cousely has delivered a fine morning for a wonderful conference in a beautiful venue. So here we are at the Botanical Garden, one of Cleveland's gems. It is completely open to all of you, and so when you're taking breaks, you should explore both the inside, but especially the outside. It's going to be a gorgeous day, especially in the morning, and all the flowers are in bloom. And the last time we were here for a Cousely conference, we were celebrating the challenges of climate change, and it snowed. Same date. So now we are exploring the challenges of interconnectedness and hoping for a spring in economic relations, and so we have spring outside. Well, as Steve said, I am Michael Scharf. For the last 8.5 years, I've been the co-dean of Case Western Reserve University School of Law, but before that, I was the associate dean for global legal studies, and before that, I had Steve's job as director of the Cox Center. So I've been involved with Cousely for 20 years, and one of the reasons I was brought into this and fell in love with this organization was Henry King. And one of the things that Henry would do as he organized and opened every conference is he'd ring this old bell, and it was old even back then. You know, we're in our 46th year. I'm sure this was old even 46 years ago, but it still rings. So without further ado, let me ring in the 46th annual Cousely Conference. So I think most of you were here last night. Raise your hand if you were here last night. All right, so I'm not going to repeat any of the things I said last night. I'll just sort of summarize for you that one of the wonderful things about being the dean, and Erica Chamberlain, who you're going to meet in a second, is my partner in this, is that we are appointed ex officio as the co-presidents of the Canada-U.S. Law Institute. And we get to work with a wonderful executive committee that Erica is going to introduce to you in a moment. And they are the glue that makes this all work. And they are the people who are bringing forth Henry King and Sid Picker's legacy and making Cousely a better and better conference and a stronger and stronger institution every year. Last night, I began with a land acknowledgement. I'm not going to do it again, but I do want us just to take a moment and realize that this gorgeous land that we're on, we're just passing through. And it has been here for millennia. And there were thousands of people, hundreds of generations before us, of tribes, indigenous people, immigrants, and others who have made this place the beautiful venue that it is now. And not all of the history is wonderful, as we know, and that's part of why you do a land acknowledgement, to understand both the good and the bad of the past. The other thing I do want to do is point out that in your programs, you have a list of our co-sponsoring organizations, and they have really stepped up this year. And I think that's also in large part due to the members of our executive committee who reached out to their friends and their institutions and helped us bring in the money that makes this conference possible. Together with the live conference, we are also remote. We have about double the number of people watching us through, the media sphere as we do have in this room, and we also will be producing the Canada-U.S. Law Institute journal. You should have, before you do, copies of last year's journal, and these are free. We want you to take those home. Every year we make enough of those so that we can give those out at the conference. All right, so without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to my partner, Erica Chamberlain, the Dean of Western Ontario Law School.
Thank you so much, Michael, for that kind introduction. So on behalf of the Canadian partner of CUSLI, it's my pleasure to welcome you to this annual conference. As you may know, CUSLI is a longstanding partnership between our two universities, and I'm delighted that it continues to thrive the way that it does. And I'm thankful that the hybrid format this year has made it more accessible, this conference more accessible to an audience in Canada and across the continent. For those of you who may not be familiar with the University of Western Ontario Faculty of Law, or Western Law, as we like to call it, we're located in London, Ontario, which is 1 or 2 hours from the border, depending on which bridge you happen to cross. Western University is located on the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenape, and Chinookan peoples on lands connected with the London Township and Sombra Treaties of 1796 and the Dish with One Spoon Covenant Wampum. So that's the land on which my university is situated. Western Law has a strong and growing group of international law researchers, including experts on trade and conflict of laws, as well as a strong international law internship program that allows our students to get first-class experiences in offices of the United Nations, the WTO, World Bank, and a range of international organizations. So we're pleased as well that we can continue this strong relationship in terms of international law with our partners at Case Western. Western Law also hosts the Canada-US Law Institute's annual Distinguished Lecture here in London, and that features leading diplomats, academics, journalists speaking on topics related to Canada-US relations. Just this winter, we hosted Michael Adams, president of Environics, who spoke on the topic American Backlash, Canadian Compromise. We also host several events geared to students, which compare Canadian and American approaches to issues like cannabis legalization, law enforcement, and of course, right now, COVID protections as well. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the members of CUSLI's executive committee for their ongoing leadership and for helping to assemble the fantastic lineup of speakers we have for you today. In particular, I'd like to acknowledge our US National Director, Stephen Petrus, our Canadian National Director, my colleague, Kai Carmody, our Managing Director, Ted Perrin, Program Director, Steve Paley, our Executive Committee co-chairs, James Blanchard and Jim Peterson, and all the other members of the Executive Committee from both sides of the border, and of course, all the broader membership who make up the CUSLI family. I'm delighted that you've joined this conference today on supply chain challenges, which I know are top of mind across our two nations. We have some outstanding speakers presenting today, and I think you're up for some very stimulating discussion. So without further ado, I'll turn it back over to Stephen Petrus to continue with the program.
Right, thank you, Erica and Michael. We're going to start off today, first item of business. We lost one of our stalwart, long-standing members of our executive committee, Dick Cunningham. And here to do a tribute to Dick is one of our executive committee members, Larry Herman. Larry?
Thank you, Steve. Last November, we were all shocked to learn of the passing of Dick Cunningham, who for years had been a stalwart supporter of this organization and a member of the executive committee. He was a fine lawyer, an outstanding counsel, a great friend and colleague, and I think it is very fitting that we pay tribute to Dick and his memory at the opening of this conference. We miss him greatly. We miss his counsel, his wisdom, and his dedication to everything that this organization stands for, and that is bringing together Canada and the United States in a major way. So I just want to say how much we do miss him and pay tribute to his memory as we open this session of CUSLI. Thank you.
Now, we have a very special treat to start off our conference, which we will hear remarks from the newly appointed United States Ambassador to Canada. And here to introduce our ambassador is a former U.S. Ambassador, Jim Blanchard. Many of you know Jim Blanchard, but I wanted to just point out some very interesting facts about Jim. He's been a long-standing member of our executive committee. He is the co-chair of our executive committee. He's a former U.S. congressman from Michigan, a former governor of Michigan, and a former ambassador of the United States to Canada. And one thing that's very interesting, he was elected governor in 1983, and he faced a $1.7 billion budget deficit when he started. And he managed, at the end of his first term, to bring that down to a balanced budget. And the people in Michigan loved him so much that he was reelected with the largest margin in the history of the state of Michigan as governor. And then, of course, he went on to do other great things, highest of which is to join Cooley. So, Jim.
All right, thanks, Steve. I accept your nomination for, I don't know what it is, but anyway. Steve, thank you. Thank you for your leadership. Dean Scharf, Dean Chamberlain, thank you for all that you do. I'm really delighted that we have students here. Students, please raise your hand, please. You're gonna hear some really good speeches, actually. Of course, you're used to being talked to all the time, but we're delighted you're with us. I also want to thank our executive committee members. They've all been great. Jim Peterson, my partner, I don't know if Jim is watching, probably is watching this from his farm in Ontario, but he's been a delight to work with for many, many, many years. And by the way, congratulations to Diane Francis for your award last night, to David Scribner for his award. We're glad that you've been so helpful to our organization and to the cause of Canada-U.S. Issues and relations. Joe Comartin, is Joe here right now? There he is, yeah. Really, that was the first I heard that you're actually going to leave your post. Are you going to retire and travel, or are you going to go off and run for Parliament again? What's going on there? Well, anyway, you've been a fabulous partner to the state of Michigan. I also know Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana. So thank you for everything you've done. He's been managing a lot of different issues, including our favorite, the Gordie Howe Bridge, but there's also Line 5. That'll be discussed later in the program. But Joe, you've been fabulous and a personal friend of mine as well, so you're going to be missed, but the good news is you're right across the river from me. That Detroit-Windsor connection has always been the cradle of cooperation, really, between the U.S. and Canada. I also want to acknowledge Rick Newcomb, my partner. He can't be here. He's an expert in sanctions, and his legal work has been going on and on and on. He's working more than 24/7, but he's the reason why DLA Piper is a platinum sponsor. Obviously, I recommend that, but he provides that in his budget. He doesn't even have the chance to enjoy this conference today. I hope he's watching some of it, but I don't know that. I hope he is. He'll let me know through email. Also, with our State Department is Russell Singer. I'm glad you're here. We hope you'll chime in wherever it's appropriate. But he's at the Canada desk, which is really the most important desk as far as I'm concerned in our State Department. So I don't know whether I'm going to get the high sign on when Ambassador Cohen, is he about ready to be? All right, so I want to say a few things because we really are honored to have the new U.S. Ambassador to Canada, David Cohen, is about to speak and give us a greeting. I will tell you this, having served in that position. You may think it's just a parochial observation, but actually the position of U.S. Ambassador to Canada is our most important ambassadorship. It's really the busiest. You get to deal with every issue. It's true that London and Paris and sometimes Rome have a social cachet more than perhaps in Ottawa. But on a day-to-day business, the relations between our two countries are so multifaceted and so complex and so important that that's why our embassy in Ottawa is the busiest. You could deal with everything from space station to alien smuggling to Great Lakes water quality to energy, trade, NATO issues. It's the gamut. And being ambassador to Canada is a fascinating blend of politics, government, and diplomacy. And you're dealing with domestic issues as well as international issues. You just think about the agricultural issues and the arguments over softwood lumber. It's really an incredibly challenging and important post. In your material is the bio of David Cohen, our new U.S. ambassador. It doesn't tell you the things that I think are even most important. I mean, you'll read that he's been a top executive at Comcast, which is like Rogers Communication on steroids. He's been a leader in communications. He's been effective with our government, our Senate. He's been a partner at a major law firm. He was a key advisor and chief of staff to Ed Rendell, who was mayor of Philadelphia, later governor, later chairman of the National Democratic Party. He's been a leader in the University of Pennsylvania, chairing their board of trustees. He's done an enormous amount. But the thing that I like about David Cohen is he is a veteran politician. He understands issues. He is the person that can handle this job that's a blend of government, politics, and diplomacy. And most importantly, he is a very close friend of Joe Biden's. Really close. A lot of people have known Joe a long time, including myself, but there are very few who are almost like family to President Joe Biden. As a matter of fact, Dave Cohen had the first fundraiser for Joe Biden when he ran for president. Not only that, but David Cohen has had bipartisan support in almost everything he has done. He was confirmed unanimously by the U.S. Senate, and I don't think that would have happened but for the fact that the Pennsylvania Republicans, including their Senator Pat Toomey, recommended him. This is a big deal. We are very lucky to have an advocate in Ottawa in the person of David Cohen. And the final thing I will say is this. When the president talks to David Cohen, he trusts what he says about what's going on in Canada or elsewhere. Trust and friendship is so critical, as we've all developed with this group. And so it is my pleasure to introduce the United States Ambassador to Canada, the Honorable David Cohen.
Much, Ambassador Blanchard, for that overly kind introduction. You are part of a very small group who understands what a privilege and a responsibility it is to serve as U.S. Ambassador to Canada. I stand proudly on your shoulders, representing the outstanding work that you performed when you served in this role from 1993 to 1996. I also commend your continued work to preserve and strengthen the friendship between Canada and the United States. I'm honored to address all of you this morning, and sorry I can't be there in person, but I'll happily embrace the hybrid aspect of this meeting to be able to address you this morning. For 46 years, this institute has provided a unique forum for experts from both the United States and Canada to discuss the most pressing legal and policy issues in our relationship. And this year's conference featuring supply chains is no exception. And although I'm joining you virtually this morning from Ottawa, I want to add how much at home I feel talking to a distinguished group of lawyers. I know my friend and colleague, Rachel Pointer, our Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Canada and Mexico, will be delivering a keynote address later today. So I'm going to keep my remarks brief and try not to step on her toes. But I do want to say a few words about what we at the U.S. Embassy and consulates in Canada are doing to build the relationship between our two countries and the progress that we've made over the past year. For me, serving as the United States ambassador to Canada is the honor of a lifetime. It's not just about being President Biden's personal representative in another country. It's about representing America to our closest friend, partner, and ally, Canada. As you all know very well, our partnership is unlike any other in the world. It's not just about trade or treaties or tourism between our countries, although all of that is important. It's about families that extend across our border and communities that are located along both sides of the border from New Brunswick to Alaska. It's about a shared set of values that informs the way we relate to each other and to the rest of the world. And it's about a friendship between our peoples that has developed and deepened for centuries. To be sure, that friendship has been tested. There have been times when it has been strained, but each time it comes back stronger. As my friend Goldie Holder reminded us in his speech last night, and that's exactly what has happened in the past few years. As I have said many times, the test of a great friendship and partnership is not when the friends agree, it's when they disagree and how they handle that disagreement and resolve their differences. About a month after he was sworn in, President Biden held the very first bilateral meeting of his presidency with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. At the end of that meeting, in February 2021, the two leaders released the roadmap for a renewed U.S.-Canada partnership, the kind of shared, ambitious, and strategic vision that could only be put in place by the closest of friends and allies. The roadmap has brought the partnership between the United States and Canada to a new level of cooperation and collective purpose as we renew old relationships and look with great optimism and anticipation toward the future. The roadmap is comprehensive, but it also has very practical implications. I'm not a big fan of strategic plans. I think you can get lost in the process, but the roadmap is not just a strategic plan, and it's not just about prosperity or security or shared values. It's about all these things and more. So the roadmap is organized around 6 pillars: combating COVID-19, building back better from the pandemic, very importantly to me, in an equitable fashion, accelerating our climate ambitions, advancing diversity and inclusion, bolstering security and defense, and building global alliances. Each of these 6 pillars is important in its own right, and they're also interconnected. For example, bringing the pandemic under control and advancing diversity and inclusion are really overlays to all the pillars. Unless we make progress on both simultaneously, we won't succeed in either, and we won't get very far with the others. So not surprisingly, given my background as an executive with a Fortune 50 company, I do have a particular affinity for the Building Back Better pillar of the roadmap. I'm not allowed to choose between pillars. It's a little bit like asking who your favorite child is. So I'm a big fan and enthusiastic supporter of all 6 of the pillars, but I do have a special affinity for Building Back Better. Recovering from the financial ravages of COVID-19 is simply a huge priority for both the United States and Canada. And we've begun to make real progress on that. In the United States, we've created more than 6 million jobs since Joe Biden took office, the largest growth in jobs at the outset of a presidency in United States history. And our unemployment rate has dropped from 6.2% to 3.9%, also setting a record for the biggest drop in any single year in U.S. history. But this recovery will ring hollow if it is not equitable and sustainable. We must ensure that small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, share equally in the recovery, especially SMEs owned by women, people of color, and indigenous peoples. After all, it is SMEs, and especially SMEs owned by underrepresented groups that were hurt disproportionately by the pandemic. This is the way the roadmap is stitched together to accomplish multiple critical priorities. Building back better in a fair and equitable manner, making sure we support SMEs in their recovery, and making sure that women, people of color, and indigenous peoples are not being left behind. Only addressing all of these issues will ensure that we are in fact building back better as opposed to just building back. The roadmap has guided the work of both of our countries over the past year, and I can confidently report that we have made tangible progress. Releasing the roadmap itself was a real accomplishment, something that could only be done by the closest of partners. And although much of our work has been constrained by COVID and other world events, we have progressed in a number of consequential ways. Most importantly, we have successfully laid the groundwork to make substantial progress across the board in 2022 and beyond. Deputy Assistant Secretary Pointer will speak more in depth about the roadmap pillars later today, and I don't want to steal her thunder, so I'll stop here. But I'll leave you with one final thought on the U.S.-Canada relationship. This one from President Joe Biden, a man I have known for almost 3 decades. And I quote, "There's nothing we," and he's referring to Canada and the United States when he says we, "cannot achieve when we commit ourselves to it. And when we work together, as the closest of friends should, we only make each other stronger." That is truly how I feel about the U.S.-Canada relationship. The United States and Canada are friends, partners, and allies in the truest sense of those words. And as we work together to advance the pillars of the roadmap, our partnership is made stronger every day. So I hope you have a great day, and thank you all very much for the invitation to appear and for your attention.
Ambassador, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us and for your informative remarks. All the best to you as you meet the great and exciting challenges our two countries face. Thank you again. And now I'll turn it back to Steve Petrus for the rest of our program.